Welcome back to Digital Futures Education. Today we're going to take a deep dive into Ecuador and the digital education of Ecuador. If you like the video, please like and subscribe, and I look forward to connecting with you in the comments. Ecuador, like many other countries, had to modify their digital education policies and practices due to the COVID-19 pandemic. They also had many initiatives in place prior to the pandemic and also are encouraging teacher training and also digital education within the classroom in a variety of different forms. In this video, I'm going to not only share some research around Ecuador, give some overview of their country and some of the details of their initiatives around digital education, but I'm also going to share some of the great exciting things that are happening there. The first research I'm going to share and discuss has to do with remote learning in Ecuador and some of the policies they have in place to help assess remote learning environments within the country. Here we have the impacts of remote learning measures on educational access and quality in Ecuador. So this is research on the impacts of remote learning, of course, and how it's being measured and the access of people in Ecuador. So, recent education policy in technology and ICT in Ecuador has proactively addressed, but not completely achieved, digital literacy amongst the student population over the past 2 decades. The country has a 10-year plan, which they talk about in this research, and it's part of a comprehensive project for the development of digital skills and infrastructure within the schools. They mentioned that the pandemic ultimately highlighted this digital access gap in Ecuador, which informed the government and helped influence the policies of Ecuador, and also the initiatives to expand additional access, which all started in 2020 and into 2021. And even though the country has begun to address the issue of digital access, the COVID-19 pandemic and the low rate of home internet connectivity in 2018 definitely led to potential problems down the line when students had to learn from home. So this piece right here, recent education policy in technology and ICT, addresses that education policy had proactively addressed but not completely achieved digital literacy amongst the student population over the past 2 decades. The Mine EDUC's 10-year plan in 2006 included improvement of the technology resources and infrastructure and collaborated with Mintel to implement a more comprehensive project for the development of digital skills and infrastructure through all of the schools. The project, called the Integrated System of Technologies for School and Community, Sistema Integrado de Tecnologías para Escuelas y Comunidades, CITEC, included the provision and integration of internet and devices into schools. CITEC also included digital content development and docent training and the use of new tools and platforms. So once again, we're seeing the importance of teacher training in the implementation of the platforms. In 2015, Mine EDUC created Educar Ecuador, an online school control management system to facilitate digital learning and communication. Instituciones Educativas in 2016. Through the platform, students, teachers, administrators, and families have shared a space for classwork, grades, schedules, calendars, communication, and more. The platform, Educar Ecuador, has already been used nationwide for 4 years before the onset of the pandemic and its role in the COVID-19 educational plan. Although lack of access to information technology created a barrier for some schools, students, and teachers. So there was existing, push to expand resources for teachers, understanding how to use digital resources with students prior to the pandemic in Ecuador. And putting some of that in place actually helped them tremendously for 4 years before the pandemic and its role in the education plan. The pandemic highlighted the digital access gap in Ecuador, which informed government policies and important government initiatives to expand digital access originated in 2021. The school director explained that learning through Zoom was not an option for his rural school, saying, "Students here don't have internet. They don't have technological means. Nothing." In December 2020, he had not heard of any plans from the government to expand internet access, but by September 2021, the government had announced the plan to install 5,000 subterranean cables in different parts of the country. Ecuadorians differ in opinion about the return to in-person learning. In the school's directors' community, the resounding cry in 2020 was for a full return to in-person school. They say that nothing compares to live instruction. He also acknowledged other voices that say that virtual education has a place in Ecuador's future. Either way, he hopes that education continues advancing and stabilizing for the well-being of students and their families. For the school director, the digital divide is not synonymous with educational barriers for his students. He said we are bringing education to them, and with this, we don't put barriers on ourselves. For us, there are no limits when it comes to bringing education to children. Although Ecuador's government has begun to address the issue of digital access before the COVID-19 pandemic, the low rate of home internet connectivity in 2018, 37.2%, foreshadowed the challenges of doing education from home. The MineEDUC's pandemic response strategy, Aprendamos Juntos en Casa, accordingly made vast efforts to provide educational resources that matched the diversity of the country. Both policies and practitioners emphasized holistic well-being as part of a quality instruction during the pandemic. Facing a widening socioeconomic gap caused by Ecuador's digital divide, they also considered the pandemic an opportunity to meet the diverse student needs through innovation. Based on the findings, it did seem that the MineEDUC's leadership was in tune with the diverse experiences of its population. As a result, its pandemic response was swift, dynamic, and ongoing. Ecuador's teachers, however, carried the weight of responsibility of making sure students were connected to resources they needed. Although the burden of responsibility falling largely on the teachers provided the need for greater valorization of teachers and led to quality education that cared for the holistic well-being of students. Teachers still need greater support to fill the multitude of roles they took on. In case of a similar situation, Ecuador would do well to alleviate the additional logistical burdens placed on rural teachers so that they can focus on providing quality education. The study was not comprehensive, and more voices would be welcome to the conversation. So what you have here is a research study on perceptions from some educational leaders on the impact prior to COVID and also what happened during COVID towards the infrastructure of Ecuador, potentially not supporting all the learning from home, specifically in rural areas due to the digital divide. There is also within this research that voice around the necessity of educators having a holistic approach to working with students and also having the resources to working with students in order to make it a really truly beneficial educational experience. This article, Pending Issues from Digital Inclusion in Ecuador, Challenges for Public Policies, Programs and Projects, developed in ICT Mediator Teacher Training. This is a great piece of research because what it does is it breaks up the response to the digital divide with resources, tools, and digital access into some very concrete, practical, government-focused approaches. This particular research, the policies of digital inclusion in Ecuador has had a rebound since 2007, placing technology as a priority access for government management. And that term access is used multiple times in this research to be the term for focus. Despite this, there are still pending issues to be developed. This study is based on a qualitative approach that through documentary research, bibliographic analysis, and critical review of literature can generate contributions that allow the identification of challenges and possible gaps to be faced by the government entities in Ecuador when proposing actions that link education and technology. So here's just an overview of the plan and the goal. They had the National Development Plan, which looked to triple internet access from between 2007 and 2010. They had a plan in 2009 to 2013 to achieve 55% of rural educational establishments with internet access and 100% of urban ones until 2013, and triple the percentage of households with internet access until 2013. Their development plan in 2013-17 wanted 90% of educational establishments to have internet access and increase the number of nationally produced audiovisual works to 18, reduce digital literacy to 17.9%, increase the percentage of people who use ICT to 50%, and within the National Development Plan from 2017 to 2021, increase coverage, quality, and access to educational services with cultural and territorial relevance. In rural areas, increase the percentage of students enrolled in educational institutions that have at least the following services: electricity, internet for pedagogical purposes, computers for pedagogical purposes, recreational spaces, water, hygienic services from 58 to 70% in rural areas by 2021. As main findings, it can be mentioned that the impact and results from the application of the National Development Plans must transcend the figures, which allow to deepen the analysis in relationship to the topic. Together with initiatives and proposals that regard digital inclusion cannot be developed in isolation and need to have comprehensive long-term management. Finally, it is essential to understand that it is not necessary to create only platforms. It is relevant to work from integral pedagogical designs that start by understanding teachers from their experiences, accompaniment, and motivation for the design of contextualized training structure on digital media issues. So here we're beginning to get to the heart of also the pedagogy as being a central part to having a high quality digital education experience. Additional part of this research includes the physical access. This access implies the phased provision of technological equipment and connectivity to public education institutions, beginning with the provision of internet in the administrative areas of the establishment, continuing with the connection and equipment in common educational spaces, and additionally providing resources to teachers and a portable kit, and internet service in the classroom for the teacher is incorporated, and finally, an internet connection in the classroom, allowing the teacher to apply active methodologies in the classroom to achieve meaningful learning. Additionally, they included the access of digital learning, which promotes the innovative pedagogical practices with a digital approach, the renewed teaching practices and learning process. So back to the focus on the pedagogy and supporting teachers with innovative practices. That includes projects with digital education, inclusive digital educational resources, interactive games, audiobooks, and teacher YouTuber videos in Spanish and sign language, interactive stories in Spanish, karaoke stories in Spanish, and a methodological guides of the reverse class teaching model, as well as other audiovisual resources for broadcasting through the online educational channel Educa and the national educational television channels are developed. An additional access included in this research is the access of teacher development. The access aims to create spaces for teacher training in information and communication technologies, learning and knowledge technologies, and technologies for empowerment and participation, for the development of innovative strategies to allow achieving technological inclusion competencies in the learning planning process in the classroom through the development of technical instruments, methodological guides, and spaces to share educational experiences that promote the development of social skills and circles of learning and innovation among teachers. The teacher training processes that have been developed are presented below: flipped classroom teaching model adapted to the Ecuadorian context, GeoGebra, teaching of mathematics with the use of tangible materials, block programming, STEM strategies, recreation and fun events for teachers. All of these initiatives have been developed as pilots, must be evaluated, corrected, and taken to massive teacher training processes to improve the 21st century skills and quality of education in Ecuador. It is necessary that the authorities on duty dimension the importance of permanent training for teachers and the proper use of ICT in order to improve pedagogical practices. So here we're focused on the area of teacher development towards focusing on pedagogical practices to implement digital education to classrooms, focused on a flipped classroom model using mathematical and STEM-based subject areas to have assessments and tangible learning experiences for students utilizing digital tools and technology, but also having methodological guides and spaces to be able to implement these tools with technology. They implemented a mobile digital classroom. It is a project that arises from the incorporation of technology in the classroom, but with the aim of promoting access to universal and quality education to contribute to equal opportunities for boys and girls, focusing on the acquisition of skills through technology and the empowerment of teachers. Survey of the ICT skills of teachers in the national education system, and guidelines for the pedagogical use of the technology park of educational institutions. Education innovation must be seen as gradual and permanent process so that space arises where the educational community can develop to face the requirements of a changing society and in a constant process of local and global interconnection. So to support an innovation, they're providing this idea of the mobile classroom, mobile digital classroom, and that it's a space that encourages the emergence of new ideas that contribute to the development of digital education, and that this is a permanent and continually developing process. The model dialogues were the proposals of Hepp, Prats, and Holgado in 2015, who indicate that the TPAC model has been one of the processes with the greatest penetration in relationship to technology and education in Ecuador, but that there are barriers and challenges that go from instructional up to teachers and disciplinarians. So you have the institutional practices, available ICT infrastructure and flexibility to make curriculum changes is a barrier or challenge. You have the students, with the challenge being digital culture and personal ICT infrastructure. And in the second order of this, you have the teacher with the self-efficacy, attitudes towards ICT, personal ICT infrastructure and perceived incentives. And in the third order, you have the disciplines, knowledge of the contribution of ICT to enrich environments and solve learning or teaching knots in the specific subjects of each teacher, and the type of ICT to be used, hardware and software, and how to use it inside and outside of the classroom. So this is a nice graphic in that it kind of goes from the institution, students, teacher, and also the disciplines that are being taught. For the institution, it's the practices, the infrastructure. For the student, it's their own opinions about digital culture and how they use technology. For the teacher, it's their own feeling of strength with using it, their attitudes towards using technology, their own personal technology infrastructure, and the perceived incentives for using technology. I find the disciplines barrier challenge very interesting in that the knowledge of the contribution of ICT to enrich environments and solve learning or teaching knots in the specific subjects of each teacher. So a challenge to specifically address each specific teacher's needs with the use of technology across disciplines of different curriculums and subject areas, and the type of ICT to be used, the type of technology resource to be used, and additionally how it is used inside and outside of the classroom. By way of conclusions, outstanding debts for digital inclusion in Ecuador. And this part of the research is great in that it really focuses on the research in Ecuador and the impact of ICT in their classrooms. The various initiatives and policies, strategies, programs, and projects for digital inclusion in Ecuador in recent years have pointed toward the achievement of similar goals in the education sector, whose names have been changing, in some cases taking some of the previous proposals and in others incorporating new ideas. Some of the proposals were very ambitious and little planned in the determined times for their implementation. In this way, there is a great debt with the education sector, since to date it has not been possible to meet all the proposed goals, including the provision of technological infrastructure to all public institutions in the country. That is, it has not yet been possible to deliver 100% of technological and connectivity equipment. Likewise, it has not been possible to meet the goals of teacher training for the development of digital skills that allow them to innovate their pedagogical practice in the classroom with the appropriate use of technology. Unfortunately, teachers in the national education system are not yet ready to adequately implement technology in the classroom. This is due to various factors such as the following: training programs in basic topics of technology use that do not make the leap towards a socio-critical approach, training programs that do not cover all the teachers in the public system, and a poor qualitative approach to the impact of these initiatives. In the educational atmosphere, there is a misleading idea about what digital education means. This does not consist solely of the provision of technology infrastructure, but of training educational actors in content that allows their humanistic and critical development from technology, not as an end, but as a means. It is not enough to teach how to use a computer or its programs. It is not enough to create digital platforms that only serve as repositories to download information and upload tasks. Above all, it is not enough to continue pretending that public policy is a matter for each minister, secretary, or authority in charge at a given time, because this does not allow proper monitoring and evaluation of these initiatives, which can be very beneficial. On the contrary, it is required to research the impacts of micro-social environments to articulate the initiatives in long-term programs that go beyond the current governments and that particularly respond to each educational reality without pretensions to become recipes. So definitely a great synopsis of the current state of Ecuador and digital education, from the perceptions and what's necessary in teacher training, and how it's a continual process and that it needs to be measured, and it's no one individual person's responsibility, but it is critically important to highlight that it does recognize that their lack of technology infrastructure limits these things that they want to do.
Ecuador has a tremendous national goal of improving digital literacy, not only in schools, but amongst its citizens as well. I think you'll find in this video that the digital education is definitely mirroring some of the initiatives that they have for digital citizenship amongst their people in their country, and also how they view digital transformation in their government policies and practices. Much of the research does provide insight that during the COVID-19 pandemic, that the country was able to modify practices and also set high goals for digital literacy, not only amongst its schools, but also for its country as well. Many of these are also driving the initiatives within the country to help expand connectivity amongst all people, both in rural areas and also in city areas. One of the highlights of this research is how even through the pandemic and resulting research after the pandemic, they found that there also is a desire to keep education holistic, and the role of the teacher is tremendously important to implementing digital education in the classroom. The government has been tremendously supportive of supporting educators to support students with a variety of additional resources, whether it be digital education resources or it be actual devices and connectivity opportunities. Ecuador sees it as a priority to help alleviate teachers, specifically even in rural areas, of the issue of a lack of connectivity. They have a teacher-focused approach to supporting digital education in the classroom. The next piece of research I'm going to dive into is focused on the government's approach to alleviating some of the issues related to the digital divide in the country. They've broken their work into accesses. These accesses address a variety of different areas. Let's learn about what they are and how research into this area is helping not only to design new teacher training opportunities, but also evaluate the problem of the lack of connectivity and the digital divide that exists. Ecuador's plan is heavily focused on improving the digital literacy and citizenship of their people in their country. They're also very focused on expanding access to a tremendous amount of schools. They have a very targeted plan to help expand this access, and they're trying to reach these goals as quickly as they can. Even though there are challenges to expanding these networks into other areas such as rural areas to help support educators, challenges still exist around not only teacher training related to implementing digital education tools, but problems also exist around providing all the necessary resources for educators in Ecuador. Two of these critical access areas that they discuss are the access of teacher development and access of innovation. They see these areas as critical to supporting not only educators with implementing digital education into the classroom, but also creating environments for additional innovation with teaching and learning, specifically as how digital education tools are used to help innovate different learning experiences. And they've gone a long way to help support and promote the innovation of learning, to utilize digital resources, and also to understand that it's a continual process. Ecuador has also made tremendous efforts to create events and festivals to help support continued innovation in digital learning. These events are well structured and allow for it to be understood that the need for digital education, even though there is a digital divide, is continual. And the country supports this continual development with events and also resources pushed through the government that help support educators in this process. In digital learning. These events are well structured and allow for it to be understood that the need for digital education, even though there is a digital divide, is continual. And the country supports this continual development with events and also resources pushed through the government that help support educators in this process. The next piece of research and public policy I'd like to present is Ecuador, Open to the World. This is a presentation that I found from millennium.org. It gives a great overview of Ecuador's digital transformation looking towards the future. And not only does it include the details around what they're planning to do around education, but it also has a whole plan around the transformation of their business practices, the improvement of their digital literacy across the people in their country. And it's a great presentation in that it shows how the country is committed to not only expanding access, improving teaching and learning, but also providing opportunities for those to not only acquire access in rural areas, but also to become better, but also to have a better idea of digital literacy and appropriate use of tools for productive purposes. In this presentation, you're going to find some amazing facts and features around Ecuador's digital transformation process. The presentation also goes into detail on the digital innovation strategy that they have within the country. They've created digital centers of entrepreneurship and innovation, and these centers are government supported to help promote digital transformation in all areas of the country.
Presentation from millennium.org, Ecuador Open to the World, Ecuador Digital. A great presentation that it combines many great, amazing components of Ecuador's digital transformation, and I'll just show you some parts of this. They talk about how it's strengthening democracy, Ecuador's reinstitutionalization, the respect to the independence of state powers, respect to freedom of expression, open and transparent government, all in the support of digital transformation in Ecuador. They also have a strong focus here on citizenship and digital citizenship within their digital transformation. They've also moved forward with digital transformation as being part of their state policy, with looking towards 98% connectivity, 80% of their government processes being online, and a focus on the digital economy. They also have the innovative and competitive area of their digital transformation called Ecuador Innovative and Competitive. They really want to bring a digital transformation in Industry 4.0 with a digital transformation of the companies within Ecuador by rethinking and redesigning business models, transforming operational models, process automation, transforming work and infrastructures, and the promotion of e-commerce. And of course, the focus on digital education in Ecuador is a key part of their digital transformation moving forward. They see the transformation of education through an ICT-based model. The Digital Ecuador strategy recognizes the right to inclusive quality education, training, and lifelong learning as one of its most important principles. They're looking to massify and universalize access to digital services and content production, strengthen technical skills and professional training in digital matters, support public policies aimed at the development of digital skills and their inclusion in the education system, promote a digital culture that encourages the safe and responsible use of ICT and its citizens. The lack of necessary skills to participate successfully in society and the labor market increases the risk of unemployment, poverty, and social exclusion. Let's go over their digital education agenda. The digital education agenda responds to the establishment of digital culture to strengthen and enhance teaching and learning processes in the education system. You have the physical access, which is the connectivity and equipment in educational institutions, the access of digital learning, the construction of the National Digital Library, innovative methodologies with a digital approach, the teaching development access, teacher training and digital skills, the communication and promotion access, the dissemination and empowerment of the use of technology in instruction and education. And we have the innovation access, the educational innovation laboratories. Promotes digital skills, performance improvement, digital literacy, and participation in the educational community. The digital education agenda, with the current situation, total educational institutions is 12,342. Around 40% of educational institutions are connected with internet access. The student equipment, light personal equipment and tablets, teaching equipment, resistant personal equipment, projectors, educational digital resources, and the connected classroom includes a firewall network control with a voltage regulator, a content server, and wireless networks. The target of 68% of connected educational institutions, that would be 8,442. The training model in Digital Centers of Entrepreneurship and Innovation in Ecuador, SDG 4, ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Development of the STEM-based training model, implementation of the model in the innovation and entrepreneurship centers, inclusion of the model in the educational system. This includes connectivity, virtual training, online mentoring, access to financial services, teamwork, creativity, data analysis, and entrepreneurships. There are agreements to promote the development of digital skills. The Ministry of Education has the virtual secondary education and also a virtual university. Universities are providing job skills training. Private enterprises, virtual ICT training courses, training for employment programs, training in cybersecurity and IoT. And additional possible alliances include more companies who provide online learning services and micro degrees, as well as some industry.
Ecuador's challenges are just like many of the others in the world who have a huge digital divide in the amount of connectivity in rural areas as compared to their urban centers. This does create a huge social inequality amongst connectivity and the ability to access digital resources. Huge social inequality amongst connectivity and the ability to access digital resources. Ecuador is, however, making very strategic strides in improving the access and improving opportunities, not only for teachers to improve teaching and learning with technology, but also enhancing the student experience. Much of the research also supports the connection of teachers' pedagogy to the use of digital education in terms of buy-in from teachers in order to improve their instructional practices with the use of digital tools. The next story I want to share is one that's powerful. It's about a student who's 16 years old, who's in the rural area of Ecuador, who is providing learning experiences for younger students in a town that has zero connectivity in terms of access. And this happened during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I want to tell you a little bit about this fantastic student who went out of her way to help provide resources to students who had no access to the government's materials that they were sharing at the time.
Article from Reuters, kind of an inspiring story of an educator in Ecuador. Ecuador teen teaches class under a tree for kids without internet by Santiago Arcos in Guayaquil, Ecuador. An Ecuadorian teenager has set up an improvised school under a tree in a poor neighborhood of northern Guayaquil for some 40 students who haven't been able to study during the novel coronavirus lockdown for lack of internet access. So they have this great picture of her working with the students at a picnic table. And what this student did was she used her own phone to access some of the resources available to these students and provide them to the students without access of technology or connectivity. And almost nobody in the Reality of God neighborhood had a computer or a cell phone with a data plan, leaving children unable to participate in the online education that has replaced regular schooling under the coronavirus health emergency. Denise Toala, 16, meets with kids and uses her cell phone to check school websites to see what homework has been assigned, which they would be unable to do on their own. COVID-19 has caused many difficulties on the economic front, but especially in education, said Toala, who was in her final years of high school. They deserve an education. Under the tree where they meet, she has set up a blackboard, educational posters, and a welcome sign that reads, "Learn to teach." According to UNICEF, Ecuador in May said only 37% of the country's households have internet access. As a result, it said 6 out of 10 children cannot continue their studies on digital platforms. The report said that the situation is more serious in rural areas where only 16% of households have internet access. So it's a great story about how this girl at 16 is helping these students who have no access and working with them to get the assignments that are provided by the country from their education department, and providing them to students that they have an opportunity to have access. But it also highlights the massive digital divide in these more rural areas and how the struggle is really about a huge lack of connectivity.
Area of Ecuador, who is providing learning experiences for younger students in a town that has zero connectivity in terms of access. And this happened during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I want to tell you a little bit about this fantastic student who went out of her way to help provide resources to students who had no access to the government's materials that they were sharing at the time. The next thing I'd like to share is additional funding from IDB to support additional infrastructure in the country of Ecuador.
About the IDB supporting Ecuador and reducing the digital gap in education, the Interdevelopment Bank approved a $45 million loan to reduce the digital divide between schools and thus promote successful educational trajectories among students in Ecuador. The IDB loan will provide connectivity and technology kits to 2,400 rural schools, of which 20% will be bilingual, intercultural, and 27% to Amazon provinces. In this way, it is expected to benefit approximately 48,000 students. In addition, laptops will be purchased for 7,272 teachers from urban and rural schools, benefiting close to 175,500 students. To enhance the impact on the educational trajectories of students, teachers from vulnerable schools who have participated in academic reinforcement programs will be prioritized. The initiative will also benefit 632 urban schools through the acquisition of technological equipment for computer labs. These efforts will positively impact more than 641,000 students. The $45 million IDB loan has a 4-year disbursement period, a 7.5-year grace period, and an interest rate based on SOFR. So, of course, this is an amazing investment in technology to support, a reduction in the digital divide and providing so many schools and students with additional technology to help support them integrate into their teaching and learning experiences.
The next thing I'd like to share is additional funding from IDB to support additional infrastructure in the country of Ecuador. The support from IDB specifically provides teacher laptops and also additional digital learning resources to help support digital education. And the final thing I'd like to share is a press release from the government around additional focus on digital education, particularly as it pertains to not only business infrastructure, but also in providing a more inclusive environment for students related to digital education.
Here is a press release from Access Alert. Ecuador Digital Transformation Bill advances in Congress. And what this ultimately notes is that on November 22nd, President Guillermo Lasso sent the bill for audiovisual and digital transformation to the National Assembly. This new legislation represents Ecuador's latest effort to align all government policy with the National Development Plan while emphasizing digitalization for all government agencies and processes. So, of course, what this does is it also places a focus on digital education as being a focus, and the digital transformation requires government agencies to digitize their processes and create educational plans to inform citizens about the new digital tools. One notable example is that notary services will be available online, including validating electronic signatures and documents. So this is a big push by their government internally to digitize processes, improve learning experiences, improve connectivity, improve the resources necessary to help provide digital transformation to their government services. The proposed bill would significantly boost technology and digital companies operating in Ecuador. The newly proposed tax breaks would make Ecuador an attractive location for additional investment in production of digital services. Telecom and audiovisual companies could benefit from the proposed tax breaks while enhancing their investment in the Latin America region. The adoption of e-government initiatives to make government procedures more efficient also represent an opportunity for companies focused on e-commerce, digital identity, and cloud services to tap into these efforts and offer new digital solutions to local key stakeholders.
This legislation aligns their policies with their procedures in their country to help support digital education, also government practices related to digital transformation, and also increasing access to those who need it. Thanks for taking the time to learn about Ecuador's digital education transformation. I appreciate you checking out the video. If you like the content, please like and subscribe, and check out some of the other videos, whether it be Argentina, Peru, the United States, and come back again, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks again.